Hello, I'm Dean Whiting, Pathology Technology Australia, and in this COVIDeocast I'd like to turn our attention a little bit more towards the future. What does our new COVID normal look like? You may recall from previous COVIDeocasts discussions about how we detect the COVID-19 virus. Tests like the PCR test to detect the COVID RNA, the nuclear material. Tests like the antigen test, which detects the protein coating around the outside of the virus. And tests like the antibody test, which tell us about an individual's immunity, the antibodies that they have to fight the COVID-19 infection. But with Australia's numbers, community infection numbers, really dropping dramatically over the last month or so, and with very little community transmission within Australia, we have to turn our attention to how we can maintain this over coming months and likely years until we have some other strategies to deal with COVID. Strategies like an effective vaccine. Vaccines are likely to be available in Australia from the middle of the year onwards, but the effectiveness of these vaccines is still to be fully determined, and it's likely that we'll be living with COVID for maybe 18 months, 2 years, maybe longer. And in this time, how do we keep Australians safe and the economy running and growing smoothly? What will be our new COVID normal? Well, the answer, I believe, remains in effective testing. But it may not be the kinds of testing that you expect or that we have been doing up until now. It's likely, even with a very low prevalence of COVID in our community, it's likely that large-scale testing will still be required. And this testing will form two particular groups. The detection group for people who have not had COVID in the past, so that means the PCR tests and the antigen tests, and testing for immunity, the antibody tests, to identify those who have successfully fought off the infection and who now have some immunity for however long that lasts. And it's likely that we will in some way identify people who are free from COVID or who have COVID immunity, so that these people can get on with doing their normal life, working, socialising, entering entertainment venues, sporting venues, getting on and off of aeroplanes, travelling, crossing borders, all these sorts of things. It's likely that this ongoing testing will facilitate our safe movement, our safe working and our safe socialising in Australia. So how could this work? So this is an imaginary setting in not too many months from now, where we have the options to be able to take tests freely at our convenience and obtain a result, either an antigen or a PCR test result to tell us that we are free of the virus at the moment, or an antibody test, which means that we probably don't need to be tested for some time because we're immune, we have antibodies on board. The effectiveness of this will be governed by how often we have these tests. Antibody tests probably every 3 to 6 months. Antigen or PCR tests probably every week. There'll be very convenient sampling methodologies, and so the so-called brain tickler of the swab may not be necessary. It may be a simple saliva test or a self-collect with a standardized nasal swab. And it may be that these tests are readily available so that you will get a result back within minutes or within a day, and that result will contribute towards, say, a passport of kinds, a credential which allows you then to operate within society. So now these won't be for everybody, I acknowledge and understand that, but for the vast majority of people who wish to work within the community, who wish to move within the community, and who wish to contribute to growing our economy, this will be a very convenient way. A story that maybe will help give an example is in the press over this last few days. There were the stories of the hundreds, if not thousands, of large haulage truck drivers who are so important to moving our important freight around the country. These guys need to stop almost at every border. They need to be tested. They sometimes wait 45 minutes, an hour or more before they can move on. And this really slows the effectiveness of our efficiency of our commerce within Australia. Not to mention takes up valuable time of people testing, which could potentially be avoided. Imagine this scenario where the truck driver could have his test or her test at their convenience, could then obtain their credentials as being COVID-free or COVID immune, carry those credentials with them, and then at the border just show the credentials and move on with little interruption to their journey. And this would be the same in places where we work, in aged care and healthcare facilities, in important food processing facilities, in sporting or potentially entertainment venues, food and beverage, for example. The same kind of process could work, where you could be tested at your convenience in convenient locations, and then have a credential generated, a certificate generated, potentially on your mobile phone, and be able to show that so that we could move on. It's a neat idea. It's doable. It'll be interesting to see whether it's actioned over the coming months. I'm Dean Whiting, Pathology Technology Australia.